So this is the last session coming up, and we have a panel. So the panelists, can you please come and take your seats? I'll introduce everybody. I've got...
Oh, do I? Or should we like line up that way?
Oh my gosh, dude. Yeah, you can do it. Organize yourselves. We got 3 people on the panel, and this is pretty cool that I got all 3 of these people to come and do this. I'm pretty excited. So I'll start with Randy because he's closest. So this is Randy Frisch, and he's the co-founder and CMO at Uberflip. And I've known Randy since Uberflip was just a tiny little baby company, and they were in tiny little crappy offices in the basement and stuff. And now
they were beautiful.
They were not. And so now they got really fancy, nice offices with a really nice gym and stuff. And they got like 150 employees ish around there, and I think they're hiring. You might want to talk to Randy later. They also they run a really cool marketing conference in August called Connex, and if you're a marketer, you should get a ticket because speaker lineup is total fire, including me. And some good speakers, and yeah, so that's Randy. Yay, Randy.
Hey, Randy.
And then I've got Kirk Simpson, and he's co-founder and CEO of Wave, which, again, I was trying to think when I first met you, and I feel like you and me and your co-founder and David Crow sat on the patio at St. Louis and drank beer, and it was 200 years ago. I'm not making that up either. And so it's been really cool to watch them become like kind of one of the super cool scale-up companies in town. Like, you guys are so big. Like, how many employees now? You're 200-ish? 260. Sorry, that's a lot more than 200. 4 million customers, tracking 200 billion of income and expenses on their platform. Like, it's super impressive. So that's Kirk. Last and seriously not least is Jen Evans, who's literally one of my favorite people in Toronto. She's a serial tech entrepreneur and a community activist, and she doesn't do either one of these things in a half-assed sort of a way. She's run a bunch of companies. She right now is the founder of SqueezeCMM, which is a content analytics platform, and she's killing it over there. And they just got accepted to this cool L'Oreal accelerator, and she's going to Montreal for the summer. She's also the founder of the B2B News Network, which is the top-ranked site worldwide for B2B news. She's also a co-founder of Tech Reset Canada with me. And I am also a co-founder there, and we're dedicated to making sure that innovation is focused on what's good for society and, kind of causing Sidewalk Toronto, Sidewalk, those guys, Sidewalk Labs guys, a little pain. She's a board member at Hope. She's an advisor of the St. Jamestown Community Center. So Jen's doing a lot of stuff. So that's Jen. Yay. So they told me we don't have super tons of time, and that's a bit of a bummer because we like to go over on everything, but we're going to try to go through this first. But I want to start with Jen, actually, and I want to start with you because you're running a bunch of different things and run a bunch of different companies. And so I wanted to ask you, do you think that sometimes companies sort of outgrow their positioning, and how do you see a company's position evolve over time, and specifically for SqueezeCMM, because I know you guys have evolved?
Yeah, and on a number of occasions, actually. I think we're on our 3rd or 4th pivot at this point. And I think, there becomes a point in time, whether it's the market is shifted, your customers are looking for something new, you're not able to charge the same price point that you were before. All of these can be indicators that you may be ready to move on to a new type of positioning. And in our case, we started with content marketing analytics. and competed with companies like Google and Bitly primarily. And we use a taxonomy-based ontology to help customers figure out the stuff about their content that you aren't measuring in Google or other platforms. So what account, for example, on social media drove this interaction, what time of day, what type of format is the asset in. So we're able to produce some pretty interesting insights for marketers. And so we got our first set of customers with that value proposition. And then it became pretty clear that they were like, we need a little bit more here. Like, the insights are interesting, but what goes beyond this? And that's actually when we worked with April on a positioning session, and we honed in then on content performance. So really looking at marketers who are looking to drive real business results with their analytics, and what content formats were performing best with which audiences, what we're getting to revenue faster, and again, very much insights-based. And our most recent iteration has actually been the data that we've been collecting as a result of that. So one of our customers came to us at one point and said, we want to take some of this and try and do some retargeting with it. And we said, well, it just so happens that we capture the IP address of every interaction with this B2B content as well, and label it with the channel that it came in on, the format, et cetera. And within 6 months, our SaaS business is still very healthy, but the data sales part of our business is now almost 5 times our SaaS business. And that was just pure repositioning. So
that's so cool. Randy, what about you? Like, I'm curious about a shift in market category. Like, you guys have recently done a big shift kind of out of one category, and you're sort of creating this new category. Like, tell us a bit about that, like how Uberflip's positioning has shifted over time.
Yeah, it was someone. Yeah. No.
Here, swap me.
All right, cool. That was hard. Now I got to remember what I was going to answer. No, it was, for us, it was a similar evolution that pushed us there. We latched on to the term content marketing early on, and some of the functionality we had was very much built for the content marketer. But as we started to go more up market, and we work with really large, big companies like, Dave's going to buy from me sooner or later, right? And
Selling. You see that?
absolutely. Yeah, discount for you will be a good deal for us. But no, what we realized was, and I don't mean any offense to Nadia, her presentation was great, content marketing, and there's probably content marketers out here, but we realized that content marketing was a really messed up term, and we were trying to play in it, and the people that we were trying to sell our solution to were really talented writers. Now, I'm not talking about startups. Content marketers and startups, they do everything. They roll up their sleeves, they figure it all out. But when we get into these larger organizations, all they really do is create content. And that's not easy. So we actually said, you know what, we don't want to be content marketing. We want to actually distance ourselves from it.
Randy wrote a book. And what's the title of your book?
Yeah, fuck content marketing.
Content marketing. How's that for positioning?
So the book was first a blog post. It took me about 4.5 months to convince my own team to publish the post, because they're like, no, we're just going to offend everyone who buys from us or will buy from us or already bought from us. But the point there was that we wanted to drive to people was not, people wanted me to call the book Stop Content Marketing. And I was like, no, it's not about stopping to do it. It's one of these things that's like, fuck my job if this content's not going to get used. And when we spoke to content marketers, they actually felt that way. So what we had to do is we had to figure out a way to distance ourselves from content marketing. We actually also predicted that some of the companies, especially in B2B, would struggle.
It kind of plays back to that point that Hannah was talking about earlier, like about defining what you are not.
Absolutely. Yeah, we didn't want to be IKEA. We didn't want to be that. And there's nothing wrong with content marketing. There's great companies out there, but a lot of them have struggled. Like Oracle bought one that ended up a shit show. One of the biggest content marketing companies called Kapost yesterday sold for 3x after like 8-10 years for like $45 million. They raised $20 million. Like, it's an industry that's struggled to get off the ground. So we created a new category, which is tricky itself. That's why we do an event. That's why we do a podcast. That's why we write books. It's almost, we have to advocate for the space as much as we have to advocate for our product, but it allows us to be a leader in it. So for us, that category is content experience.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and I spend a certain amount of time in the book talking about that because people like the idea of creating a new category, but it's really hard to do.
Tough.
It's
Honestly,
like really hard to
I
do.
wish we were selling, banking software sometimes.
760 products, though, dude. Like, I don't know.
It's
Do
a
you
challenge.
Really?
I mean, you have to, and as companies here scale, you'll battle. I mean, we now have a board. The board sometimes is like, okay, like show me ROI on this category thing, and I'm like, it's coming. It's coming. It'll be there.
Well,
and
your investors got to be patient.
yeah, they are.
Ours
are good. Ours are good, but they always want to see, as Dave said, like, we'll give you an extra $1 million if we can see how this conference produces ROI. Well, it's I don't know, chicken before the egg. I don't know which one is the chicken and the egg here, but we need both to build this. And down the road, as you put in your presentation, there's a lot of the things that we're competing against are so silly the way people are doing it. And one day people will wake up, even those companies will wake up, and they'll say, oh my God, we got to get this new way to do business, the same way Dave's realizing, or Fiserv is realizing by bringing in Dave.
Yeah. Kurt, I want to talk to you. So in the book, so Kurt was cool and let me interview him for the book. And so and let me write up a little story for the book. And he was cool about approving it really fast too, which I appreciated because I had editors and stuff. And I really loved the story you told me about how Wave, sort of how Wave started out as very much accounting software, and then you guys have kind of moved through this transformation of being bigger than that, and it tied into a change in the business model and everything else. So I kind of wanted you to talk about that.
Sure. So what I've taken so far is that venture capitalists need to be patient, which I'm not sure there's many in the room.
Are you a venture capitalist patient,
Yeah,
Kurt?
no. I don't think there's a venture capitalist on the planet that's overly patient.
No, I think that's a rare kind of venture capitalist. Randy's got to introduce us to these patient guys.
Exactly. Apparently they're on Randy's board. You need to get to that is wicked.
Yeah, that's right.
You need growth equity, not venture capital.
Oh, right. Growth equity, much more
they're
patient.
That's our positioning right
Much
there.
more patient. Good people, too. So I told you the story of how we first came to market with a small business accounting tool. Very sexy space. We were looking for the most sexy space to get into and thought small business accounting would be really great.
So hot right now.
It is. It is. We got that trend wrong. But anyways, and we were highly influenced by what Mint was doing on the personal finance side. And this was peak Mint. It was kind of 2010. Everybody was using Mint. Everybody was talking about Mint. Lots of innovation that was happening out of that platform. If they had it come out 5 years later, it would have been a completely different story.
Yeah.
And so we looked at that and we thought, there's a real market for this in the small business space. And we talked a lot about price in some of the previous presentations. And we were looking at what they were doing, which is it's very hard to get people to care about financial software, especially to create budgets for your personal spending. And so thus give it away for free, get a whole new set of users off the sidelines into your tools, and then make money in different means. And so we brought that out and thought it was more relevant in small business than it was for personal, because personal, you don't use it. The churn rate is super, super high. And thought we could make money off of advertising and data. What we quickly found out was that you need a lot of scale, and that kind of scale is much easier to get on the consumer side than it is on the small business side. And so we had a lot of scale, but by no means enough to make that model work. Simultaneously, we started seeing that the world of financial services was changing. Square came out with the dongle, and that started to really change the landscape. If you think about it, the idea of embedding payments into software is now everybody's doing it. Well, that's a relatively new phenomenon over the last...
That's really new. That's right.
A small business owner, if you were opening a coffee shop 5-7 years ago, you would go and you'd buy your POS, and then you'd call up Moneris and get your payment terminal, and those were two separate purchasing decisions. Now that's one. And so we started seeing what was happening there and started seeing that we didn't think it would just stop at payments, it would go into other financial services. And so long story long, we started repositioning the company into more of a financial services company. Remained free, which has been an interesting journey for us. But through that process, signed up over 4 million customers and are now really starting to gain traction on the revenue side of the business.
Like, what was the hardest thing there? Like, everybody sort of perceived you as accounting software. Like, how did you make that shift? Like, how did you help customers understand, well, no, we actually do all this other stuff, and not all of it's free either, and...
Yeah, it's been a challenge, and to be honest, we still, I don't have 790 products, but we've got a lot of products, and so positioning is a challenge. And it's a constant challenge and one that we're developing new muscles in. I will say that my belief, and maybe it's just me, but I don't think so, is a lot of startups, especially in the Canadian ecosystem, do not put nearly enough value on marketing in the early days. We all care about getting the incredible developers and the incredible product people and the incredible data people and the incredible ops eng people, and really, like, almost at the bottom of the list is an incredible marketer. Because most of us don't really fucking understand what you guys do.
No, that's part of it.
I love the idea of it moving the needle on the business, but quite frankly, like, unless you see it in action, you just don't believe it to be true. And I think we were, like, so typical in that realm, like highly, tech-focused, product-focused, et cetera. And marketing was like, a person and a intern. Back to your point, right?
Yeah.
And I think we got spoiled because we found out we did nail the initial positioning, and we got really good SEO, and so we started developing this funnel where we sign up like 50,000 customers a month. And honestly, all of that was pretty much luck. And then, it wasn't the biggest fire, so we didn't develop it. We didn't invest in it. But that's a big regret.
Oh, isn't that interesting? I got a question kind of for all of you. I don't know how much time I have, so you guys will have to give me the hook like you always do. Like, how do you know if your positioning is working? Like, how do you know if it's not working? That's just for any of you who wants to answer that. Like, how do you know? Like, is it just, do you feel like it's gut, or?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I think, it's tricky because the question is, who do you want it to work with, and what's an indication of success? Obviously, when your customers come to a conference that has the name of the category you built, you start to feel good about yourself. Some of the stuff that our product marketing team is here tonight is doing a great job with is starting to influence analysts, right? And we're playing in a world where we're selling to big organizations, and they read these analyst reports, or at least we believe they do. And so what we need to do is we need to influence these analysts, which is hard to do because they have their talk track, and some of them have been doing it for 10 years. So to suggest that they need a new category or quadrant or wave or whatever term they put to whatever they do, that's hard to do. So there's different ways to break in to say your positioning starting to break through. I think getting your customers to repeat what you're saying is really the key. We try and do that on things like G2 Crowd, if people know, or now it's just called G2. They repositioned G2 and
You don't want to just be the crowd.
Yeah, they bought a 2-letter domain. They must be doing okay.
Yeah, that's right.
So they, what we were able to do there, which was really cool, was we knew it would take a lot longer with analysts to break through and get them to create a way. Like, we've been focusing on Forrester, but what we were able to do is work closely with G2, make relationships there. They built their term for wave is grid. They created a grid for content experience and let us set the criteria. Once that happened, we go talk to Forrester or Gartner, and we're like, I'm really excited to see when you guys are going to follow G2. right? And
we
so
do the
you
same
start to
thing.
trickle it, and then you start to see customers who are seeing the G2 thing, or start to see, tweaks to how Forrester releases their reports.
I think this influencer stuff is really important if you're doing category creation play, because you got to sort of justify, does this thing deserve to exist? But like, how about the other two? Like, if you're not creating a new category and you're you used to live in one place and now you're somewhere else, how do you know that's working?
For us, it was, is this on? Am I audible? Oh, thank you. This is going to be in my
So again,
Just swap around to finicky.
It was going from customers going, oh yeah, this is interesting. Oh yeah, this is nice. Oh, so a palpable level of excitement, like amped up when we got to the point where we had something that they needed, they knew they needed it, they hadn't seen it before, and it was going to change how they were doing things in a fundamental way, and that was the lights going on for us.
You got something to add?
Well,
If you want.
just a couple things. I mean, one is I think you can look at the data and understand whether or not, like, what are conversion rates happening and all that kind of stuff. And then the second is I just like to listen to the customers. And I mean, there is nothing like Twitter for getting immediate customer feedback. Like, I
Actually,
love
negative
it.
feedback, actually.
Yeah.
Like, you're saying,
Yeah.
sucks. This is
Yeah,
stupid.
but even
Like,
even their language of how they're saying that is indicative of whether or not you're hitting the right buttons, right?
I moved to Q&A. I was just about to do that. We're going to move to Q&A now. So I'm going to open it up. You guys want to ask some questions? You want to take one?
We'll take one, and we'll go to that, and we'll get
Well, actually, no, we're not going to ask.
Hey guys, great talk. Thank you for taking the time. My question is, at which point do you realize that this is a positioning problem or it's a product problem? Because a lot of common theme that you guys have is it's understanding the user, understanding their needs. But at which point is the product that's really not solving the need? I'm just curious.
I have a theory on this, and it's important for me now because I'm a consultant, and so people will call me up and say, hey, fix my positioning, and part of what I have to figure out is it actually positioning, or do you just have a shit product that no one wants to buy? And it's because I can't fix that. And so, and what I find is this: if you have customers that are super, super, super happy, like customers that love you, customers that refer you, customers are super, super happy, it is unlikely you have a product problem.
Yeah.
And particularly if what you've got is people that come into your funnel, the first time you talk to them, they're like, what do you do again? And how do you do that? And yet the ones at the end of the funnel are like, I'd die without you. You're so amazing. Oh my God, I love this. That there is a disconnect between what people that use you know and understand versus what you're trying to communicate them at the beginning, and it's just not working. So, and that's my opinion, but I don't know. You guys can answer that.
Yeah, I think, if you start out and you're not solving a problem, or the problem is not being solved in the right way, then the issue is the product. If it's how the product is being used or how well understood the application of the product is, then it's a positioning issue.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would I don't know if this is working, so I'll speak loud. It's working. All right.
And you're speaking loud.
And both. Wow, it's supposed to be loud. So I'll go back to what Kirk was saying before. I think talking to customers will help you figure that out. My definition of talking to customers often is getting more out on the road, just based on the type of user we have. And it was interesting. This was like about a month ago. Serious Decisions is this big marketing conference, and I was at it, and I was fortunate to have lunch with the CMO of SAP. So like really big company, and usually I wouldn't actually get any perspective from the CMO, being really honest, but she was actually considering being a board member, so she had seen a demo and things like that. The coolest part was she started to describe not her perception, but she's like, the problem is my team thinks you do something completely different. She's like, I took the time to take a look at it, but they thought you were something else. Now, in our case, they thought we were something a few years back. So it kind of comes back to Jen's point. I mean, earlier, it's you constantly have to evolve what your positioning is to make sure that people know what you are. We have evolved as a company, not necessarily always in pivots, but expansion of what we do. So back to the product question, a lot of us are always going to be short on the product side. So the question is, how do we position what we have today, but also position more of a vision or mission of what we're trying to accomplish?
Really well said.
Question?
Oh, sure. Hi. All of you spoke about repositioning a product at some point in your career. You made it sound kind of easy. Were there challenges? Like a little bit. I mean, it's like it didn't work, so we repositioned. What were some of the challenges?
There are decades.
Like internally, were there challenges? Did you lose customers? What was kind of that journey?
I feel bad. I don't want to.
Go ahead. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's not simple. It's a lot of iteration. And you have to really, I think, everybody on the panel has expressed this really well. It comes down to what's the customer need and what problem are you solving, and how are you articulating what you're doing to solve that problem. That probably sounds really simple, but if it were, then April wouldn't have written a book. Thank you. April wouldn't have written a book. We wouldn't all be sitting here trying to figure it out ourselves. So in a way, your positioning work is almost never done because markets are evolving, customers are evolving, and it's really important that you're able to stay on top of what those changes imply.
I'm not a marketer, so it was easy for me because I just asked the marketing team to do it and then told them it didn't look good enough and we tried it again. No, I think in our situation it was much more organic, and it took a long time. And I would honestly say we're not even there yet. So again, this is back to, there's tech debt, and everybody pretty much understands it, but there's marketing debt too. And I think we've all got to get to a better understanding of what that looks like and what is the value of getting it right.
Yeah, so I remember, I think the year was 2013, if I remember right. We had a really big customer, which was Hootsuite at the time. They were rocket ship, things were going so well. And back then, our ACV was like so low. We were like, $50 a month, so like $600 a year. And it was wild. Hootsuite was paying us $500 a month. So we thought we had hit the jackpot. Our ACV now is like $50K, right? I mean, $500K, Dave. But no, seriously though, I remember. So Hootsuite, spending all this money with us, and they called us and they canceled, right? They had gone so deep and we had done so much for them. And I went home that night and I cried to my wife. It was like I thought it was the end of the world because we had kind of set this as what we could be. But then we actually took a step back and we were like, okay, well, what happened there? And I actually went out, we spoke to them and everything like that. And the feedback we got was, we would gladly pay you $100,000 if you were this, right? And it's like, we like everything that you're promising. You're just not there yet from a customer service perspective, from a flexibility of the platform perspective. And that was when we actually realized, we're building something that really big companies are struggling with more than small companies were. Had we not lost Hootsuite at that moment, we probably would have never pushed ourselves to make that change. So, I think you have to not always take some of the things that you're hearing personally, but really reflect and say, should we shift completely, right? The trickle that happened after that is we went from gaining very few customers per month. You guys probably see thousands of customers a month. We were seeing hundreds, and then all of a sudden we went to, we're bringing on 10 to 20 a month, and we're losing more customers than that. So you have to change the way you celebrate success internally, you model for success, everything around that.
Last question. Make you good, no pressure. Now that's it, we just shut, but it's somebody. There was somebody, oh yeah, there's one back here.
Hey, so me and my wife drove from Boston to Toronto yesterday and read your book out loud to her the entire trip. And because I thought it would be romantic. Exactly. So, and we got into this big argument over your book this morning, but I can't even remember what it's about. My question is, yes. My question is,
It was romantic up until then. No.
if you're creating a category, so we teach kids how to code, and we think code is means a whole lot of things to a whole lot of people, but we want programmatic literacy to build the software engineers of the future, from first keystrokes to first job. But how do you position that? How do you create the category and the positioning, and how do you get it right in 15 seconds or less?
That's what's for you.
You call April.
It's important to have good marital relations. This is more important than anything else. Well, I heard two questions. So one is how do you make sure you get your positioning right? And the other one's about this category creation stuff. I think that category creation is really, really hard. And I think it's really hard to do when you're very small. And Randy's taken a good, solid run at it, but he's also not two people in the basement anymore. He's getting to be a pretty big company. He's just raised a big round. He's got this unicorn of patient investors that nobody else has. So I think category creation is really hard. I think the payoff is really big if you can get it right, but I think it's really hard. So most of the time I would say you probably don't want to do that. The second part of how do you make sure you get it right is, again, that's kind of the nut of the whole book, but I think there's lots of ways to get it wrong. I think comparing yourself to the wrong competitors is the easiest way to get it wrong. Even for something like you're running a coding school, do you compete with other coding schools, or do you compete with learning how to code online, or do you compete with not learning to code at all, or do you? And I can't answer that question, but your best customers do know the answer to that. And then once you understand that comparable, then I think you have to kind of stay open to the fact that you might actually be something that you don't think you are right now. And so you need to get the comparable right so that you can get the differentiators right so that you can be expressing the value right. And I don't know, you guys obviously read the book, and so maybe I did a crappy job of explaining that in the book. Sorry. Yeah.
You need a
I
microphone.
need a mic or something because I can't hear you. Or you just come up. I've never seen his legs work without the little thing. I didn't know they did that.
The little thing. I love it. He's tired. He's winded.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. I've done a lot of the positioning work on the product so far, and I do think that the groups that we've created are actually accurate, but we haven't gone through the whole book. And I was paying attention to the part of your slide that dealt with context.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to sort of have you discuss a little bit more the impact of context on positioning and product.
Yeah, so in the book, I kind of describe positioning in a market as context setting for a product. So if I tell you I have a product and my product is CRM, I haven't told you anything about the product yet. I just say my product is a CRM. Who's my competitor? Salesforce, right? Give me 3 features that it does. It probably tracks accounts. It probably tracks deals through a funnel. I probably track contact. Just by declaring my product in a certain market category, I triggered a bunch of assumptions in your mind about what my product is all about. Now, if I do a bad job of declaring that and the assumptions that I trigger are wrong, that's where the confusion comes from. So I had this company call me, and they're email for lawyers. That's what they told me they were. And so they're giving me this demo, and they're like, we're lawyers, and we have this thing, and it's special email for lawyers. I'm like, are you kidding? Seriously? They need special email? Okay. And I'm thinking they compete with Gmail, and they're probably pretty much free. And I asked the guy, I said, show me the calendar. And he said, oh, we don't have a calendar. I'm like, dude, your email, like you know what you call email with no calendar? It's crap email. That's what it is. But it turns out that what their special feature, like the thing they could do really, really well, was this neat context-aware file sharing, which we also don't expect email to do. So they basically took this product and picked it up and put it in the team collaboration space, and that switch in context triggered different assumptions. So I say, oh, your team collaboration, who do you compete with? They're team collaboration for lawyers. So who do you compete with? Well, it's probably Slack, and that's better because that's not free, and I don't need a calendar, so good. And file sharing is right in the middle of what I do. So that shift in context changes our expectations about what the product's all about. And the coolest thing was the pricing, right? Because you would expect email to be free, but team collaboration, people pay a lot of money for that. And then these guys are team collaboration for lawyers, right? So you're like, well, team collaboration for lawyers must be even more expensive. And I kept telling the guys, I was like, you know what you should do? You should call up the lawyers and tell them that you're going to charge by the minute. And I want to be there when you tell them that and see how they like it. But the expectation for everything, pricing, features, who my competitor is, everything, the expectation is different. And so it's like context, right? It's like context. If I see Beyonce up on stage with 1,000 backup dancers and whatever, like she's a rock star. But if Beyonce shows up and she's incognito and she's singing at the local bar or whatever, you think she's pretty good, but you probably don't think she's Beyonce. So the context matters.
Can I add one thing, and I don't know whether it's helpful, but based on what you said, it triggered something. One of the successes that we had early on was we tapped into an emotional connection. So the front page way back in 2010 was essentially lose the shoebox. And for any
I
small...
love this thing so much. It used to be on our homepage, and like as a person who was like I was using the shoebox at the time, and it just struck dread into me.
So every small business owner knows exactly what a shoebox is, and so the thought process of I can get rid of this thing that's driving me nuts, that creates all sorts of tension in my life, and I have no idea whether or not this works for your business, but as a father of 3, all I think about is my kids better learn to code in order to, thrive 20 years from now. And so you need to tap into the emotional connectivity that every parent has about the future of their child, and to me, you will go to the moon.
Thank you. Thank you, April. Thank you to the panel.
Sorry.
Thank you to everybody. Yes.